Welcome to the Wisdom of Women show. Business is the most powerful, innovative force in the world. And with visionary women leaders at the helm, we can lead in both impact and profit. Today's world needs the wisdom of women in business. This is why we are here to help women grow. Are you already a successful visionary woman founder leading a high impact company? The Wisdom of Women show is designed just for you. We are a community of women founders, investors, and leaders who want to see you rise. Join us as we unlock opportunities and prosperity for women-led enterprises. The future of business is women. Are you ready? Welcome to the Wisdom of Women show. We are dedicated to amplifying the voice of women in business. A new model of leadership is emerging, and we are here to amplify the voices of women leading the way. Thank you for joining us today as we illuminate the path to unlocking opportunities and prosperity for women-led enterprises by amplifying the voice and wisdom of women. Today, we have such a special guest. We have with us today Carla Small, who is the co-founder and CEO of EarlyBird Education, a platform launched in 2020 that uses game-based assessments to identify children at risk for reading difficulties. Her passion stems from her own personal experience as a mother of a child with dyslexia. Previously, Carla was an executive director of the Digital Health Accelerator at Boston Children's Hospital, where she developed innovative education tools and formed partnerships with companies like Amazon and GE. Her background includes roles at Medtronic, Edwards Life Sciences, and Codman Academy Charter Public School. Carla holds an MBA from Harvard and a bachelor's degree from Dartmouth. Her dedication to ensuring every child can enjoy reading and develop confidence makes her a leading figure in literacy education, and I would say most certainly a force for good. So welcome, Carla. We are so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Coco. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah. So tell us, as you know, my icebreaker, I'm always focused on, if you go to Amazon and you type in business, or you type in leadership, you just get a wall of not very diverse faces. So I really would like to bring out the voice and wisdom of women and books in particular. And it doesn't have to be related to business, but what's one book by a woman that has significantly influenced your life?
It's a great question. So Mary Catherine Bateson, who is a cultural anthropologist, wrote a book called Composing a Life. And she followed 5 women who had very different careers and different career paths: a dancer, an engineer, a college president. And she really, in doing this, challenged the notion of the linear career progression. I read this book when I was young. It's an old book and probably not well known by many people, but I read it when I was younger, and I was at that stage where you're sort of like, what am I going to be when I grow up? I don't know what I'm going to be. Is that a problem? And it was quite reassuring, because I was like, wow, there's so many different pathways. And in fact, your life takes different turns and twists along the way. And really what Mary Catherine Bateson is saying to us is you need to find the meaning in those interruptions and acknowledge the power and the value of those. And people's lives, especially women, have so much multiplicity and ambiguity that, it's better to sort of acknowledge that up front and weave that together into a life, compose a life based on sort of weaving that story. And now for me, it was a powerful book when I was young, but it's still, as I reflect on it, and I do often, how I've been sort of thoughtfully able to, often inadvertently able to sort of compose my life with very different pathways, very different activities that I've done along the way. So it's an unusual book, but I recommend it often.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. It's not a book I've heard of. You said it's Mary Catherine Bateman?
Mary Catherine Bateson. An interesting thing about her is her mother was Margaret Mead, another famous
Oh,
cultural anthropologist.
yes, absolutely. And what, how cool is that? So composing a life, and I like what you said about meaning in the interruptions, right? Because so many times we have interruptions in our lives, especially as you said, as women, and how you navigate that dance is whether your life feels good or it doesn't, right?
Right.
Weaving that life together. Beautiful. So, Carla, I just have so many things I want to learn about from you. And, we're both in healthcare or we've spent some time in healthcare. And um, you were at Boston Children's and you were part of what is called the Digital Health Accelerator. And so and then you then decided to launch EarlyBird, but tell us a little bit more about those experiences,
Mhm.
Boston Children's, what got you there, and what is the Digital Health Accelerator and what you were able to experience there.
Yeah, well, and sort of continuing on the theme of sort of how life takes twists and turns,
Totally.
I say that my career is really a combination of intentional pivots
Hmm.
and opportunistic leaps. So my intentional pivots, after 4 years of working at a large ad agency in Chicago after graduating from college, I really chose to pivot and focus on the well-being of families and children, which
Mm.
became my lifelong pursuit. And after 7 years of working at a startup where we really defined benefits for family members by offering childcare and elder care supports, I realized that I wanted to learn how to become a better business leader. And I went back to graduate school. I went to Harvard Business School. I was there after 11 years of working, so not your typical student. And actually the only mom in the class of 900 in my first year. And then after business school, pursuing a career in healthcare was another pivot. But I've also had these sort of opportunistic leaps. When I was out on leave with my third child, my neighbor asked for help with their business, and that launched a long, wonderful career as an independent consultant that enabled me to be present on the home front in a way that was important to me. And then most recently, and as you're talking about, when I was running the accelerator at Boston Children's Hospital, and it came time to spin out what was at the time my favorite project in the portfolio, I decided to leave what was a really fantastic job running that accelerator to found EarlyBird with two of the leading scientists in the world.
Oh my goodness. So you said so much here. So I love what you said. First of all, we all just have to write this down, right? Intentional pivots and opportunistic leaps. And things happen and how you frame it. And there's moments when you say, okay, I'm going to lean into really an area of passion for yourself. And then sometimes opportunities come up and you have to leap. What was it like? Well, tell us about what you were doing in the accelerator, what that was like.
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
representing a very innovative organization,
Yeah.
purpose-led
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure who you were attracting and the different kinds of founders that were coming were pretty cool, right?
Spectacular people, so intelligent, so passionate about what they were doing, building amazing things, often just lacking the business side of the expertise. So, not well known even in Boston. It's an 80-person team of technologists and business people who can take the ideas of the doctors and nurses and researchers and spin them up. And we have a technology team because it's really important not just to have the idea, but to build it out, test it, really figure out how it should work, and then be able to launch it with funding and leadership and things like that. So yeah, we had done tremendous work in terms of really enabling this group of physicians and researchers to understand the value of innovation and how to go about it in a really constructive way that can lead to commercial success. And had, successful spinouts as that. But even the act of coming forward with ideas, we built in a whole opportunity sprint where they learned how to look at an idea from a business perspective so that they could, on their next innovation, be more knowledgeable about what types of questions they'd be asked, how to be smart about pursuing it.
That's wonderful. And were you able to see different businesses sort of take off and go?
There were ideas that came from the inside that spun out. There were technologies that came from the outside that were utilized across the hospital. It was really fruitful, very exciting time.
Oh, I just love that. And all very mission oriented, making the world better. It's such it's an important piece of culture and society that I feel like, there's that kind of an accelerator was really fulfilling. So how did you sort of alluded to it a little bit. So EarlyBird must have been one of the businesses,
Yeah.
and that led to you kind of deciding to go and play a little bigger role.
Yeah, it was one of 30 in the portfolio. The
Uh-huh.
one I was always most passionate about, as you mentioned, my youngest
Uh-huh.
has dyslexia. I had been on the journey. I knew how hard it was as a parent to try and navigate what the options were and how to get the best resources for a child. So I was always quite passionate about this project. And then the science was incredible. My co-founder had done the original research that showed that we could predict which children would have issues with reading as young as kindergarten.
Wow.
And that's really important because if you get to a child early and then you give them good instruction, you can prevent dyslexia. So this is what really we're all about. So I had this sort of soft spot in my heart for this project, really paid attention to it through its whole journey in the portfolio. And then when it came time to spin it out, I admit I interviewed a few people to consider them to be leaders for the organization, but I just couldn't let it go. It was just too important to me. And so I had the luxury of taking this fantastic technology and science and then spinning it out with the two co-founder scientists.
And this was in 2020.
Yeah, it was
Wow.
about 5 minutes before COVID.
Oh, geez. And so, all right, I'm going to come back to COVID. So you went ahead and you said yes, and then what did that look like? Like what? How did?
Yeah, we licensed the technology out of Boston Children's Hospital. We
Uh-huh.
built an engineering team to build it out further, and it had been used in more of a research application, and we had to make it commercially viable. And then, as early as the January of the next year, we were in schools. Our first market was the school market.
That's amazing. And I know you also now also sell direct to families, right? To
That's
parents.
right. That's right. I mean, our mission is really to identify children who are at risk early to get them what they need. And we've had a phased approach to this. So our first phase is to get this into schools.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had great luck with that. EarlyBird is being used in districts in half the states across the country. And
Wow.
we've really transformed the world of early literacy assessment. So the EarlyBird assessment is a game. The children play a game, they're having fun, they don't know they're being assessed. And while that's happening, because we use AI scoring technology, we're getting amazing information back to tell this comprehensive story about that child's strengths and weaknesses in terms of early literacy. And then we can offer what is the right solution for that. So very exciting that we're in schools, but really our second phase, and the one that's personally very exciting to me, and the phase that we're really focused on right now, is going to direct to consumer. So in my case, Matthew, my youngest, was diagnosed when he was 8, but I
Mm.
could have told you when he was 3. I
Yeah.
knew we had it in the family. My dad has dyslexia. He was the youngest of 3. He wasn't learning like his siblings. And yet I really didn't know what to do about it. I was hiring tutors, but I didn't know what type of tutor I should be hiring. I was wondering about adaptive technology. I was wondering if what he was doing was just normal, but he was just possibly delayed. So it's
Mhm.
really a tough journey. You're on your own, I think, all too often, especially before a child gets to school. And so for me to be able to offer this to families is really powerful. And with this, we're introducing not just that assessment that tells you what's going on, but also the intervention, the instruction for that child. And it's all in that fun game format. It can be played at home, it's convenient, and it's a full program. So recognizing sort of how navigational support is important for the parents, it's a full program with a literacy specialist who helps you understand this is what's going on with your child, this is what they need, this is where you can get it, this is what you can do at home, this is where you might need supplemental. And I would have done anything to have this service when I was in that stage in life.
I love that. And it's so often I find with founders, often, especially with women founders, we build things that we need.
Yeah.
We build things out of our own challenges and our own experiences. And so, personally that this is going to be helpful to families. And, then you can focus on being of purpose, being of mission. I have talked to a number of ed tech companies over the last couple of years. And I just want to say your success in being able to break into all these school districts, that didn't just happen by accident.
No. That's
So
a tough market. I will say that.
It's a very tough market,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
like, again, if I'm thinking about a founder who's in ed tech and is struggling with this, you tell us how you did it. Was it an intentional hires? Was it people who had the experience in relationships already? Did you have that? Like, what was the strategy there?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do have to say we're centered around a pretty extraordinary product.
Yeah.
And that, it always comes back to that in my mind. Certainly knowing the customer, what they need, what they want is critical for shaping that product. But we started from the beginning from a product that was evidence-based. As I mentioned, I started with 2 scientists. Like, we don't do anything unless there's good science behind it. And sadly, in this world, there's many alternatives that aren't evidence-based. And I see way too many families spending a lot of money on things that don't make sense. So it's very important to us that it be evidence-based. And so the product was good that way. And it was also innovative. I mean, we've transformed the way people think about assessing young children. It should not be painful. Before EarlyBird, the classic was a paper pencil screener that a teacher would sit across from a child and, basically sort of drill them on these questions. And, we have anecdotal stories of kids with autism who have never been assessed before, who can be assessed now because they're playing a game and they think it's fun and they're distracted by it. And yet we get a full picture of that child. So I do think the product is essential. And then we were quite lucky in that we had good early penetration in our first market, like 10% within a year market penetration. And that was because the word of mouth around the product was spreading as well. And then, I do agree, it's a tough market. It's got a long sales cycle.
Yes.
There are a lot of factors. COVID was a mixed blessing for us. It was initially a real setback because we were finishing some of our validation research as COVID hit. It delayed us substantially. And then during COVID, obviously, there weren't a lot of purchases of anything going on. What happened, interestingly, on the positive side is the minute people were back in school, they're like, I don't know where this child's been. I don't know what they know. I don't know what they can do and what they can't do. So we had an assessment that could be used in the first week of school because it's a fun game. The kids don't mind doing it. And we could tell those teachers a full story about that child. So that was positive. I would say now, interestingly, we're seeing in the marketplace, people are overwhelmed because there's been so much post-COVID, there's teacher shortages and things like this. So it's a hard time when you have to sort of make your way through a lot of what's going on in the ed tech space to make your way through. But the product is important, and then really listening to the customer and hearing what they need, and being seen as a leader in this field is really important.
Super important. So there wasn't a hire per se that already had relationships. You really used and leveraged the reputation of your product and telling stories of your evidence-based product to get it out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's incredible. That says a lot about the quality of your product and of how you've documented the quality of your product.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important for founders to really understand that it's not, you're just because I said so, you're taking it to that next level.
Yeah.
And so now you're selling D2C. And so how has that changed the way you approach the market?
I mean, obviously a whole different marketing story, right? Going directly to families, getting the word out. Word of mouth continues to be incredibly important. Half of our business is coming from referrals. And what's really exciting is there's so much need in this space, and there's really nothing going on out there for these families. There are not options that enable their children at home to play games that are based on really thoughtful scope and sequence around what a child needs to know foundationally around literacy to grow their skills, to get them to be ready to learn. And I'll tell you, the numbers are startling. We have 1 in 5 in the population have dyslexia or symptoms of dyslexia. And so that means, 4 kids in every classroom, probably.
Right.
And
Right.
2/3 of our 4th graders are not reading on grade level.
Wow.
And a lot of this can be prevented. I mean, we say we prevent dyslexia, we really do, because what you do, and the research shows this, if you find them early and you give them the right instruction, they will learn to read.
Yes.
95% of kids will learn to read. And so, for us, this crisis is tragic, especially when you think about the mental health implications. So you read to learn, you learn to read, then you read to learn. And if you don't make that transition, you feel stupid and you start to have anxiety and depression. And, I feel very strongly that a lot of our mental health crisis could be averted if we do a better job of finding these kids early and helping them out. We had a 6-year-old who had used our direct-to-consumer product, and we had identified high risk for dyslexia. And he said to his mom, he goes, "Mom, will you call grandma and grandpa and please tell them that I'm not stupid, that I have that thing that you call dyslexia." So, parents worry about labeling and naming kids and how they're going to feel, but kids already know. They know they're learning differently than the children around them. They're already starting to feel bad about themselves. So how can we equip them with really good support so that they don't go on that journey?
I think it's so important. I have a daughter, well, 2 daughters, and one who has very considerable learning challenges, and my other younger daughter, 16, and she doesn't have dyslexia, but she does have processing challenges. And it took her a really long time to learn to read. And so it eroded her confidence in such a way. And what are your, and she does have anxiety. And I remember when we worked with the neuropsychologist around, diagnosing what was happening for her, she was like, well, there's anxiety, but there's also this learning thing, and which is the first. She says, like, I think there's a processing, and once this is freed up, the anxiety can go away. And sure enough, now she's in a different place and she has her confidence. But and this is a kid. And so, Carla, to your point, it's when you said that you're testing 1 in 5, but really there's probably 1 in 4 children who are in first grade or whatever, kindergarten, that could be having dyslexia, because these things slip through the cracks.
Okay, totally.
Right. As parents, we all do the best we can, and you don't know, is like, this normal? I don't want to create something that's not there, and sometimes you just don't know. If you're in a classroom with 30 kids, maybe it's just, you just don't know. The teachers aren't able to find out until it's late, right?
Yeah.
But this gives a way that you can not be different, not be sort of carted out, pull out of the room to go talk to some teacher or some person, and you may not feel comfortable. And so how well are you testing, right? And now you're playing a game, and then, and I just think it's so transformative. And
and that's sort of, I guess, if you want to ask, our challenge in the direct-to-consumer space, because parents need this when their children are young, because children do not mind getting that instruction when they're young. They start to mind it when it starts to feel like they're getting special treatment that's noticed by, their social peers. And in fact, you can't do any damage with this. We're just giving good instruction. So if the child didn't need it at all, they just are better prepared for first grade or second grade. there's no downside to this, right? And yet we're talking to parents of 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. They may not even know that this is something that they should be thinking of. And that's where we're, really on a journey to get the word out about the value of finding this early and then getting that good instruction. So you obviate all of those downstream mental health issues.
It's sound, I totally, I relate to it in so many ways. That early intervention, in my work, in my business, the kids who get into early intervention of any kind really do see such hugely different results as life goes on. It compounds, right? It really does compound.
Totally. I've heard it said that 2 hours in second grade equals half an hour in kindergarten, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just efficient.
Yes, absolutely. And if you can get more of that specialized help when you're in kindergarten or preschool, even better, it's like the compounded interest of that is just going to see itself straight through. And then when you are 7 or 8 years old, it's going to be easier to overcome your learning challenges. And do you find that it's related at all to math? Do you see
there's another disorder, if you will, called dyscalculia, which is a sort of similar and parallel initiative in math versus literacy. And there's a pretty high co-occurrence of the two.
Yeah, that makes sense. Processing, right? Our neurology and
processing is another issue. Absolutely. Some kids with dyslexia have processing issues, others don't. I mean, It's a myriad description, right? There's so many ways that this can show up in a child. What's really exciting, you mentioned something about the neuropsych, and we're a graduate of the neuropsych journey because that's what you need in order to get services in the school systems across the country.
Yes.
I've heard tell it's $12,000 in California, and often sadly a 9-month to 12-month wait to get the person that you may want to have do your neuropsych. But what's I think exciting about what we're saying is, if you get to these children early while their brain is plastic, you don't actually even need a neuropsych, right? I don't need a neuropsych on a kid who I think is at risk for dyslexia or for reading challenges caused by anything, because I'm going to just start right in on good instruction. I'm not going to wait that 9 months. I'm not going to pay that money. I don't need to. Let's just get going on good instruction. And then the hope is that you actually may never need that, right? That we will have gotten to that child early enough and rewired their brain. And that's what we're doing to really obviate all the needs for those downstream costs.
Yeah, well, and you're talking about equity right now. You're talking about equity and access, and and I didn't mention it before, but it went through my head because if you can't afford that $12,000, it's which most people cannot. It's you have to wait till you have to be really in a bad situation for the schools to offer to do that for you.
Yeah.
And it's that's an equity thing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So from a business perspective, tell us, I mean, I love you. I can hear the traction. I've heard some of your successes. What have been your biggest challenges that you've had to overcome along this journey?
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit on one. The school market is hard. That was quite the journey for us to sort of make our way, and continues to be not the easiest place to sell. And I didn't pick the easiest category to go into. Let's just say that. But I think, one thing that was both a challenge and a priority for us that I'm quite proud of is that we really have done a good job of translating science to practice.
Yes.
So we took really solid science that came out of the Florida State University, Florida Center for Reading Research, where Yakov Pesher, my co-founder, is out of, and Nadine Gobb's work at Boston Children's Hospital. Now she's at Harvard Graduate School of Education. And we built that and took their research, coupled it with others who were leading in the field, and built the whole product around that science. We validated it in a multi-year study in schools across the country. This is not cheap. And that
was my next question.
Yeah, and you don't make a change on a dime when that's the core of your product. Like you literally have to think about what are the implications of the change that we're thinking about. And it may be a change driven by commercial pressures, like, oh, parents want this or schools want this, but first you have to evaluate, does that make sense for the science?
Mhm.
So I'm really proud of the fact that we stayed true to the science. The product is still amazing, and we have to meet these certain criteria to be listed on certain lists. We're meeting those criteria. I'm really proud of that. And we have other scientists that are eager to partner with us that I think wouldn't have happened if we hadn't maintained the integrity of it. But it is not easy. And
No.
sometimes I joke in my next life, I'm going to sell athleisure wear or something where you can just change it overnight, right? Like, I like red. Let's do red tomorrow instead of like, oh, what's the, what are the psychometric implications of that decision kind of thing.
Well, and so you sort of tapped on having a clear strategy, right? You definitely, like, this is how we're going. We are going to
Yeah.
take this particular evidence-based scientific approach. And that's a big sort of pillar decision
Yeah.
around how you're going to, and it's a core value, right? You're not going to, even if it's unpopular, even if it's hard at times, even if it's costs too much, right? You're going to stick with that.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to develop the product, and how did you fund that stage?
Yeah. Well, and it's never over. So we started with a
No,
product that came out of Boston Children's that was for kindergarten. Then we had to do more validation to add preschool, first grade, second grade, third grade. So that journey is never over. And any change that we make, again, has to be sort of scientifically validated. The funding, I will say, one very fortunate thing of coming out of Boston Children's Hospital is I could always get a meeting, right? This is the #1 pediatric hospital in the world, and people respect what we're doing. There was a lot of respect for the accelerator. So I was quite fortunate sort of on the funding front that I could get the meetings.
Mhm.
And, the first part was just selling on the vision and surmounting the resistance around ed tech. And then we hit COVID during our fundraising stage, so that, we had to sort of slow down and hunker down with a smaller ask. But, ultimately we were oversubscribed, and we've been oversubscribed in every round since. So we've been quite lucky. We have amazing funders. And I kind of mentioned the arc of the journey that we're on. We're going into schools, we're going to consumer. I didn't say, but our longer term vision is that this should be part of every pediatric exam. That
Oh,
we test a 4-year-old for their sight and their hearing, and why aren't we figuring out if they're going to be successful in life because they know how to read? And so this is not just an ed tech venture, it's a health tech venture as well. And so and it's a social impact venture. So we have funders who are in all spheres of that. And for that, we've been quite lucky.
Oh, tell us about your funders, a little bit
Yeah.
about why, so the glorious thing about what you're describing is that you have funders, and,
Yep.
and you've been able to probably pick a little bit about who you want to work with.
Yeah.
And tell us about that.
Yeah. So one of the early funders out of the gate is a health tech funder called Flare Capital. And again, you wouldn't see why they'd be interested in this, except that they do see the longer term health tech opportunity. And they're based in Boston. We had a good relationship with them through Boston Children's Hospital. Our lead investor is David Hornick out of Lobby Capital. He's just an extraordinary man with a Midas level investor, tons of experience. So he just really is a fantastic advisor and investor because he knows what's important. We focus on what's important. We don't spend a lot of time on what's not important. He's just been a fantastic partner. We have social impact investors, including Amplify Capital out of Toronto and Mass Mutual Catalyst Fund out of Boston, or out of Massachusetts, I should say.
So where are you now? Are you at a point where you're what's your run rate? Where are you going in terms of how far?
Well, things are great. We have, as I mentioned, we have the schools business. We're hunkering down around the family's business. And then that family's business will be our stepping stone into the pediatric market longer term. And that's a whole story about reimbursement and medical technologies, a whole very different pathway. But yeah, and as I mentioned, our investors have been extraordinarily supportive. So we're in a good shape for sort of building out that vision.
That is exciting. Where do you see EarlyBird 10 years from now?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd really like to be a household name that people appreciate, that you can prevent dyslexia,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that we were a critical component of people not only realizing that, but making that happen in their household. And if you have dyslexia in your family, you have a 1 in 2 chance your family members will have it, your children will have it. So for those families, it's just very clear they need to pay attention. They need to pay attention early. There are early signals that you can be looking for, and just get on it, right? And we can help you get on it with a tool that's friendly for the kids and friendly for the family as well.
That's amazing. And do you, I mean, it sounds almost like it wouldn't matter. It would just be helpful to your kids,
Absolutely. Absolutely. The
right? Is
games they play, they'll just be
better
better
prepared.
learners. Yeah.
Wonderful. So we talked about your funding. We talked about your horizon, your overcoming challenges. So tell us, what are your wishes as a leader? Like, what are
Yeah.
you developing personally? What are you working on right now?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think one thing that I've learned on this journey is that being a CEO is all about decision making,
Hmm.
day in and day out, big decisions, little decisions. And I think I didn't fully appreciate this, even though I had been a manager before. I don't think I had fully appreciated this until taking this journey as a CEO. And you get a lot of advice from a
Yes.
lot of different places, and really knowing how to sort of listen for the advice, factor it in when it makes sense, not factor in when it doesn't make sense. It's something I continue to work on, because I know what I don't know, and I do like to get advice on the things I don't know. And yet it can be hard to parse through the many different opinions that you'll hear out there.
That's such great wisdom, honestly, because it is true. It's that moment that you step out often and make your own decision,
Yeah.
right? Like a
Yeah.
lawyer will tell you something and you decide
Yeah.
to take a different position,
Exactly.
and you know what you're getting yourself into, but you do it
Yeah.
anyway, right? And
And
it's
legal advice is a great example of that, right? Like constantly being given a long list of things to worry about, and you have to pick. I'm only going to worry about 2 and 10 because the rest are just yeah, acceptable business risk, right?
yes, right. I have to choose. I have to choose
Yeah.
which are the monsters I'm going to deal with and which ones I'm not.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so what are your last final words for a founder who is growing their company and, trying to get over some of those big hurdles of gaining traction, trying to like figure out the recipe for that exponential growth where you make it to, you really penetrate 10% of the market that quickly. Like,
Yeah.
what do you tell a founder in that situation?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a matter, obviously, it's always going to come back to the team. And do
Yes.
you have the right people in the right place at the right time? Another very hard part of being a CEO, right? It's, you almost need to hire someone who's ready for what's happening next year instead of what's happened this year. And yet you don't always have the resources or the wherewithal or the experience to judge them. So, I think finding those right people, and then, you know, I actually think the other thing that can be hard when you're a small company is making sure that the motivation is aligned so that they're going to be there in good times and in bad. And for us, we've been quite fortunate because every single one of our employees, to a person, is as passionate about what we're doing. And that's really, really powerful for motivating people to keep on keeping on, even when, you might have a bad sales meeting or something.
I totally agree with that, Carla. Whenever there's a discussion about purpose and profit, and, to me, purpose puts the sales into profit, right? Because
Yeah.
it's for that reason, right? If
Yeah.
someone might not work as hard if they're just trying to hit a sales number, but they will if they're trying to help more kids learn how to read.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
right. And if you can speak that narrative,
Yeah.
then you change everything, right? The whole company has a different context.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, I just love that we got to spend this time together.
Likewise.
And I am so impressed with what you've built and inspired. And I cannot wait to see how it all continues to unfold. And oh my goodness. I'm so glad that you've had all this success and that you're making the impact that you are, and that children are really receiving the benefit, and parents, oh my goodness, all the parents out there who are struggling to try to help their kids learn to read. And so this is really a great example of a business and a person who is a force for good.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you.
Thank you, Carla. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today on the Wisdom of Women show. Thank you for illuminating the path to unlocking opportunities for growth and prosperity for women-led enterprises. We value your experience, Carla, and we value your wisdom. We thank you so much. The world is made better by women-led business. So let's all go make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Is your business ready to accelerate? Take the Business Acceleration Readiness Assessment today and find out now at www.aforceforgood.biz/quiz. Take the 5-minute assessment and you will receive an instant response on the 4 essential areas of alignment needed for business growth. You will also receive 4 free tools specific to your situation to help you and your team accelerate success right away. Go to www.aforceforgood.biz/quiz and find out what you can do to accelerate, impact, scale, and profit today.